Welcome to this Euractiv online event, which is kindly supported by PGE, the Polish electricity company. We're here today to talk about cogeneration and district heating and their role in the energy transition. District heating, as you may know, is widely regarded as an enabler of the energy transition and decarbonisation because it helps bring heat to cities, and it does so efficiently with minimum losses using pipeline networks. But district heating systems are still often fueled by coal, and this is the case especially in countries like Poland. So how can district heating be decarbonised, and how can cogeneration, as the technology of choice to fuel district heating systems, can transition to a coal-free world? To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Robert Neu from the European Energy, Kaisa-Riitta Koskinen from carbon neutral Helsinki in Finland, who will be joining, I hope, in a few minutes, Paul Voss from Euroheat and Power, Hans Korteweg from Cogen Europe, and Piotr Szembor from PGE. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us today. We'll start this virtual conference with a few short opening statements from the speakers, and then we'll turn to a Q&A discussion moderated by me with also questions from the audience. To ask a question, just click Ask on Vimeo, and I will try taking as many of those questions as possible. I think that's all for me, so without further ado, let me turn to Robert Neu from the European Commission for an initial statement. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Frederick, in the hope that you can all hear me. I would like to start by saying that for answering this question, the political context has become very clear now. We need to achieve a 55% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 and almost full decarbonisation by 2050. And to achieve the 55% climate target, the Commission is currently working on what we call a Fit for 55 package to try and align the various instruments that support achieving those targets to these new ambition levels. For energy efficiency in particular, which is the area that I'm responsible for, this means an increase of the existing targets by 2030. And of course, as we all know, energy being responsible for 3/4 of the EU greenhouse gas emissions, and around 60% of that coming from heating and cooling, it's clear that this sector needs to, has a major challenge over the coming years and decades. We nevertheless believe that there is still significant cost-effective energy savings potential out there in the economy, notably buildings, transport, industry. So this is a challenge, but it is, according to us, feasible. And we at European level will continue to work on measures that will drive that, for example, in the area of eco-design and energy labeling. But it's also clear that efforts at national level need to be scaled up to achieve these more ambitious targets. And that is also why we are currently looking at revisions of the measures, and in particular of the Energy Efficiency Directive, which includes already measures for district heating and cooling. Now, we had a public consultation in the context of the preparation of that review, and that shows that many stakeholders consider that the current directive is not really capturing the existing heating and cooling efficiency potential to its fullest. In particular, looking at some of the details, respondents say that the comprehensive assessments and cost-benefit analysis that need to be made in order to support the potential for efficient district heating have really lacked follow-up implementation. So they might have been done, but they haven't really been followed up with proper implementation. It also showed that at local level, municipalities need quite a lot of support in designing and implementing district heating and cooling networks appropriately. And we therefore believe that member states should do more at local level to drive the implementation and the follow-up of these comprehensive assessments. If we then look at the current debates on EU taxonomy, that also highlighted the need to look again at the approach for promoting high-efficiency cogeneration, including in the context of the Energy Efficiency Directive. And that means that in the context of the revision and the new goals, the new ambition, we are looking at our current definitions around fuel neutrality, of high efficiency cogeneration, because I think we consider that for making cogeneration future-proof, we need to start looking at alternatives to carbon-intensive fuels. Having said that, of course, efficient district heating and cooling systems will continue and will have to play a stronger role in the deployment of renewable energy sources and in the pathway towards decarbonisation. And our aim is with the ED revision to support that transition. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Let me check now whether Kaisa Reite Koskinen is with us.
I am here, but
she
unfortunately
hasn't managed to join yet. So we'll turn immediately to Paul Voss from Euroheat and Power. Paul.
Hi, Fred. I could actually hear Kaisa. I think she is with us. I don't mind going, but I don't know if I'm the only one who.
If you're with us, can you speak?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. It seems
that
yeah, it seems that I have some kind of a camera problem. So sorry about that. And you cannot see me, but I am here behind the black screen.
Well, that's perfect. We're here to hear you more than to watch anyway. So please go ahead.
Yes. So I'm representing Helsinki, which is the capital of Finland, and we have a very strict carbon neutral target. So we want to be a carbon neutral by 2035, so within 14 years. And as Helsinki is a city which is located in very north part of Europe, so we have a lot of need for heating. So, and more than 50% of the direct emissions are actually coming from the heating. And that's, of course, when we want to be carbon neutral, we have to focus on the heating. More than 90% of the buildings in Helsinki are connected to the district heating system. And about 90% of the district heat at the moment is produced by burning fossil fuels. It's about 50% is coming from coal, and rest is coming from the gas. And so basically at the moment we have two coal combined heat and power plants and two natural gas combined heat and power plants. And to make this even more challenging, the government of Finland, they made legislation that the use of coal is not allowed on energy production after 2029. So it is even, faster than our carbon neutrality target. Many cities in Finland, they replace coal with biomass. But as the need of the heat here in Helsinki is so big, actually we are using 20% of the district heat in whole Finland. So it is, very big share. If we, just replace a coal by a biomass, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to start to reduce carbon sinks of Finland, and that's why it's not possible. And to solve this problem, we launched Helsinki Energy Challenge, which is basically a competition. Our mayor promised to give a €1 million prize for the person or for the university or the group who will solve the problem, who is giving that kind of a best option, how to keep Helsinki warm without burning fossil fuels or burning biomass. So we wanted to get rid of the fossils, and we wanted to get rid of the biomass. And actually, it was a big success. It was, we got more entries than we ever expected. So we more than 250 different groups participated on the competition. We select 10 finalists, and actually the prize was divided with 4 different groups. And at the moment we are on the process where we are trying to implement and where we are trying to see that, you know, which parts of the proposals we are going to implement to solve this heating problem. But there are a couple of that kind of, you know, a clear trends or the clear ideas which were, you know, basically in every finalist proposal. And one of them is that the heating is going to be electrical. So the electrification of the heating, it is a very clear trend. It is also that the future of the district heating and the heating in overall, it's going to be a combination of distributed and centralized heat production. So at the moment, it is very much, you know, we have a big power plants, but in future it's going to change. So I think that there will be a more distributed, small scale production, you know, like geothermal and then heat pumps, you know, on the building level. There are going to be multiple actors on the field of heating, so it's probably not going to be just, you know, one big company who is solving the whole district heating thing. And the last thing, you know, what I want to add here is that it's not only about how we produce heating and heat. It is also, you know, how we use energy. So energy efficiency it's my favorite thing, and it is going to play a bigger part on this big picture. But this is basically, you know, my opening remark, and maybe we can continue discuss later.
Thanks, Kajsa, for setting the scene and giving this testimony of how it's being done in Helsinki. Paul Voss, this is now your turn.
Hi, Fred. Hi, everybody. I'm afraid you're going to find this quite repetitive because I think our views in principle align very tightly with what the last speaker just talked about in practice. I mean, heat is obviously a really big deal. Some years ago when I started in this job, I spent a lot of my time struggling just to get attention for the question of heat within the broader energy transition. I think that's over now. There's a very rich discussion about the way we should heat and decarbonize our buildings, and that's great. So we talk a lot about the need for a new policy framework. In many countries in Europe, we still heat our buildings by burning oil and gas in individual boilers or by using fossil fuels in district heating networks. The building stock's not nearly efficient enough, so there's a lot that needs to be done to improve the building stock so we don't need such high temperatures. There's a lot that we can do around energy efficiency policies and tax and so on to incentivize the shift to more sustainable heating alternatives. So that's one type of thing, and I'm sure we'll discuss the way that might be translated in the coming Fit for 55 package. But it's also true that district heating itself will have to change. I mean, I really like heat networks, as you can imagine. I kind of fallen in love with heat networks because I believe that they solve this very difficult problem of bringing large amounts of decarbonized heat into our cities. I know this can be done because I see it already in places like Copenhagen and Stockholm and elsewhere, so it's doable and it doesn't need any particularly exotic technology. It already exists. It's just a matter of putting it in place. But as you said, the heat networks today, I mean, they vary widely from country to country and even city to city, but for sure, lots of them are still based largely on fossil fuels, and obviously that's not consistent with the ambitions of the Green Deal, and obviously that's not the future. I think coal is quite an easy one to solve, just because the structure, I mean, the economics are such that I don't think coal has a particularly bright future. So you see that there's a lot of coal, for example, in district heating in Helsinki. 10 years from now, there won't be any. And I think you'll see that pattern repeated across Europe, of course, in some countries particularly, but not only further to the east. It will take a little bit longer, but that transition's coming. Biomass is a big share of renewables in district heating today, and I don't doubt that it'll continue to play a role, but as Kajsa mentioned, there are structural challenges that mean that I don't think we'll be able to increase indefinitely the share of biomass in district heating. So we're going to have to see other decarbonized solutions emerge, and that'll be a mix depending on local circumstances. I hope we can see a lot more use of waste heat from data centers and factories and whatever else. Solar thermal, geothermal, power to heat. So there's been a lot of talk at European level about sector integration the last couple of years. That's great because actually district heating can provide cheap storage, and we can pick up a lot of excess renewable production and use that to power big heat pumps or big boilers and provide balancing services to the grid while also decarbonizing the thermal networks. Then probably the elephant in the room today is the question of CHP, and specifically CHP on gas. It seems to me, I mean, there'll be other people who are more expert than I am in the question of the future of the electric grid, but I would imagine that we're going to need some gas CHP for balancing purposes in the future. But obviously that's not going to be acceptable to run those on natural gas indefinitely. So I suppose that we're going to see a certain amount of green gas CHP plants, whether that's hydrogen or biogas. I guess it will depend on local circumstances. But I think the important message is that district heating networks need to change, but they can. I mean, we see the technology already, the resources are there. It's a matter of, like with the energy transition generally, learning to accept the idea of shifting from an OPEX-based model to a CAPEX-based one, so that we invest in sustainable heat networks today rather than spending on fossil fuels indefinitely. And if we do that, I see a bright future for the energy transition and for the role of district heating and to some extent CHP within it. I think that's okay for now.
Thanks, Paul. And let me turn now to Hans Korteweg from Cogen Europe.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'll just start out a little bit about Cogen Europe in case you don't know it. We were obviously representing the cogeneration industry here in Brussels. We have over 60 members, 13 national associations, and around 50 organizations spanning the entire value chain for the technology manufacturers, users, and consultancies. A couple of years ago, the cogeneration committed itself to creating a more resilient, decentralized, and carbon neutral system. Energy system by 2050, where we see CHP or cogeneration as its backbone. To substantiate that vision, just a year ago, Cogen Europe commissioned a study, an extensive study, to look at the role of CHP in 2050. It uses the ambitious commission scenario of 1.5 tech, which assumes a high end use of electrification and significant demand reductions. The study found that CHP is a key enabler of a cost-effective net zero energy system, whereby optimizing CHP across electricity, heat, gas systems will deliver higher energy efficiency, significant emission reductions, translating to lower energy system costs up to 8 billion per year starting in 2050. Study also found that by 2050, CHP could deliver 16% of total electricity and 30% of total heat. In the case of district heating, the study concluded that CHP will remain an important source of heat, accounting for approximately 40% of the total heat supplied to cities through district heating. The study further concludes that CHP is relevant in an efficient source of dispatchable power supply. I think this is important in the support of electrification and where you see increasing shares, obviously, of variable renewables. Now, 2050 is 30 years down the line. I mean, today we're talking about 2030. So in the context of the Fit for 55, we see the energy sector needing to mobilize to increase its ambition. For example, CHP has important potential to grow along the modernization of existing district heating, especially in Central Eastern Europe, but also Germany, and then the deployment of new district heating and cooling systems in countries like the UK and in Belgium. That will entail a phase out of coal in district heating and cooling, switching to lower carbon fuels, and increasingly phasing in renewables. A prioritization of CHP over less efficient power only in heat only solutions ensuring that CHP systems are renewables ready to avoid a lock-in. Recognition of the key role of CHP in power grid stabilization, complementing rather than competing, say, with heat pumps or waste heat. And then recognizing the key role in district heating, both in terms of local system integration, system efficiency, flexibility. We see CHP needing to be maintained as a key technology to enable efficient district heating systems, while of course also prioritizing a switch to renewable fuels. Accounting for the local context, of course, in terms of existing infrastructure and availability of energy sources, as some of the speakers have already pointed out. I think I'll end it there. Thank you, Frederic.
Thanks, Hans. And let me turn now to Piotr Szembor from PGE.
Thank you, Frederic. Hello for everyone. Yes, for the beginning, I present some statement, PGE, our statement for the beginning. The PGE Group strategy, published in October last year, presents transformation plan and path to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. But by 2030, the PGE Group intends to build 2.5 gigawatt of new capacity in offshore wind farms, 3 gigawatt of photovoltaics, and expand our onshore wind farm portfolio, but at least 1 gigawatt. We also are to complete our renewable generation mix by the construction of flexible gas-fired generation and by to replace coal with gas in our CHP plants. We will use gas as transitional technology in our pathway to climate neutrality. This means that gas-fired turbines which we build today will be able in the future to use CO2-free gases only. Of course, we will need access to funding for our investment into CHP plants and related energy infrastructure. For example, of course, district heating networks. Therefore, from our perspective, it is important that gas as transitional fuel will be recognized as environmentally sustainable. Otherwise, the costs of financing such investments will be much higher and slower. Soon, we know that Commission will propose new targets and measures to ramp up renewable energy by 2030. At the moment, heating and cooling, and especially district heating and cooling, are the sectors with already established renewable energy targets that member states should strive to achieve. District heating sector should demonstrate an annual increase of renewable energy share of 1 percentage point. We believe that these rates are for the time being accurate, challenging, and reflects state of the art when it comes to availability of renewable technologies. From our perspective, district heating systems and CHP units being in the heart of them are at the moment in very difficult position. On one hand, there are actually limited technical and economical possibilities to connect red heat sources to our district heating networks. On the other hand, skyrocketing prices of emission allowances make it extremely hard to stash away funding for new targeted solutions for district heating networks. This trend will likely be even more significant with the upcoming revision of EU ETS directive. PGE provides heat supply for numerous users, yet in transitional period we cannot simply move away from natural gas CHP but still need to comply with EU ETS. That is why when programming a new heat market architecture, we believe it should strike a balance between climate target and sectorial, technical and economical conditions, especially when it comes to district heating supply. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Piotr. So we're done now with the initial round of statements, and we can go directly to the Q&A. And so let me start with this question for you, Piotr Szembor. So decarbonizing district heating in a country like Poland must be some big endeavor, I guess. So have you evaluated the investment needs for PGE to decarbonize district heating, and maybe even for Poland as a whole? And what alternatives are you looking at? Because natural gas, you mentioned, is being considered, but it's probably not the destination, because that is still a fossil fuel which has carbon emissions. So have you quantified those investments, and what are the options that you're looking at?
Yes, we quantify, and actually in every our district heating systems we try to switch from coal-based heating systems to, on the first step, to CHP gas systems. We take into account that with the Council conclusions from December last year, gas CHP remain an important technology with a significant role in reducing CO2 emissions, especially in regions transforming away from coal and dense urban areas. We think that natural gas will allow us eliminate cogeneration in the most developed heating distribution network in Europe, and that we have in Poland. And of course, we see that such investment give us possibility to improve air quality, improve quality of life of local citizens, and of course it gives possibility to cut very quick CO2 emissions, even by 70% when you switch from local gas heat, not efficient boilers to efficient CHP cogeneration. And the PGE Group strategy assumes that by 2030, more than 70% of sources in heat production will be zero or low carbon. And after that, we plan to deploy CHP units using zero emission fuels. All investment decisions for natural gas are to be made by at least 2025 at least. So no decision for coal assets. Soon the last final decision to gas CHP, and then if we have hope that will be possibilities to switch to hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuel, and of course deploy more renewables.
Okay, thanks for that, Piotr Szembor. Maybe let me turn now to Kaisa-Riitta Koskinen. Can you maybe explain, it's a bit the same question I just asked to Piotr, first quantify the investment needs to get to your zero carbon target that you identified, so the amount of investments needed and the alternatives in terms of technology that you're looking at. So you said biomass was out of the question, so you're also looking to by electrification, in fact, because you did mention that, what do you mean exactly? Can you maybe expand a bit on that?
Yeah, of course, we haven't made, clear decision on the investments yet, so it's very difficult to say and quantify the exact euros. But it is going to be a big investment. It's not a cheap practice. It's very clear that the big part of the solution it's going to be heat pumps and they are going to pump heat from different sources. So at the moment we are looking for a deep geothermal, seawater heat. It's also a heat pumps. Of course, that kind of waste heats from the industry and from other sources, they are also on the field what we are looking for. And of course, we understand very well that the best technologies today, they are not the best technologies after 2 or 3 years. So we want to keep that kind of a flexibility on our plans, so that we start to do investments now, but then we don't fix them, that we want to keep that kind of flexible solution that we can change when there are better technologies on the market. Of course, it's going to be that. But of course, energy efficiency is very important. Different kind of demand control technologies, they are going to, so we are also trying to reduce the amount of the capacity what we need. Also, what we are at the moment investing is how to reduce temperature network of the district heating network. So because if you have to produce very high temperature on for the network, then it's not so efficient from the economical perspective for the heat pump. So of course there are very many different kind of technologies. And of course, also the energy storage technologies, they will play a big part.
Okay, thank you. Paul Voss, maybe let me turn to you now, because you have, I guess, a European wide overview of what it would take to decarbonize district heating entirely. Is that something that you've evaluated in terms of the investment needs and the different technology choices that are available depending on the different locations? Because I understand that different countries are running different kinds of district heating systems running on different types of fuels. So have you made a sort of a broad mapping exercise in terms of the solutions that are available and the investment needs as well?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work on this. I mean, I try not to do much of it ourselves because, frankly, I'm not a huge fan of studies produced by lobby groups that tell a story about how much their technology can help, because I always worry a little bit about their independence. So we've kind of stopped doing those. But there's a lot of work that's been done in academia and by some of our member companies on what this might look like. I mean, the general sense that emerges is that right now, I think that heat networks have something like 12 or 13% of the thermal energy market in Europe. And the potential up to 2050 gets closer to 40%, depending on whose analysis you believe. I think that means building something like 15,000 new networks over the coming 10, 20, 30 years, which is an investment that certainly you'll count in the billions rather than the millions. But I tend to think it's money relatively well spent. As I said a few minutes ago, when you build heat networks, what you're doing is spending on infrastructure so that you can stop spending on fuel, because so much of the heat that we actually need is already available in our communities, either because it's renewable energy or because it's waste heat from our industrial activities. There's also a large benefit that can come from densifying existing networks. We have networks in many, many cities, but they are small and run alongside the gas grid. So one of the things that I think is likely to happen over the next 10 years and beyond is that you start to see the expansion of thermal grids as customers come off natural gas boilers and move towards heat pumps in more rural areas and towards thermal networks, in part based on heat pumps in the more dense urban environment. So the opportunities there, and I think sometimes we get into I think one of the problems of district heating has been around a long time, and there can be a certain dustiness associated with it because it's not brand new. And I often hear figures about spending on district heating expressed as costs, whereas I hear talk of sort of billions spent on hydrogen expressed as an investment opportunity. And I think one of the things we should do ourselves is begin to talk more about the investment opportunity in heat networks rather than just the cost.
Okay, thanks. Let me turn to Hans Korteweg with a similar question, just to get a broad overview of what your estimations are when it comes to decarbonizing cogeneration systems in Europe, the kind of investment needs that you've identified, and the main options that are being envisaged in terms of technology.
Well, first of all, I'd like to start with what has already been decarbonized for cogeneration and in the context of district heating and cooling. I mean, in the past 10 years or so, the CHP mix for fuel has undergone a significant transition towards renewable energy sources. So coal has actually rapidly declined, and renewable integration share has actually tripled from 10% in 2009 to 30% in 2018. Fit for 55 should foster system integration of gas grids, decarbonization to ensure that CHP more rapidly decarbonizes. That being said, even without a clear roadmap for renewable and decarbonized gases, we see industry taking the lead on renewable CHP projects for district heating. For example, in the city of Kiel in Germany, they were able to reduce their CO2 emissions by 70% just by switching from coal to flexible gas. Today, these 20 or so engines replacing the large coal plants can rapidly ramp up and down to compensate for fluctuating availability of wind and solar power. And this new business model provides high flexibility while maintaining high efficiency. In the case of district heating, the city of Haßfurt in Germany has chosen an interesting solution, an integrated solution, which includes wind, solar, an electrolyzer, heat pumps, biogas, and a hydrogen-ready CHP. So they're all optimized to supply the lowest carbon at the least cost heat and power to its customers. So CHP has added a flexibility option in this case to run on 0 to 100% on green hydrogen obtained from local renewables. So many of the existing CHPs in Europe can be refurbished at quite a low cost to accept varying shares of hydrogen. Our rough calculations indicate an abatement cost of around 5 to 8 euros per ton of CO2. We have many examples of this in cities in Italy, Poland, where they're combining waste heat, CHP, and heat pumps to reduce their emissions to increase the energy performance of their district systems. To sum up, I think district heating carbonization goes hand in hand with district heating modernization and greening of the fuel mix. I think the phase out of coal is clear, just it's a matter of when, not how. In some cases, switch to natural gas as a transitional lower carbon fuel, increasing renewable decarbonized gases. In other cases, a switch to renewable sources were available, including biomass, heat waste, geothermal, solar thermal, hydrogen. But I think what's important is, irrespective of the energy choices chosen, I think energy efficiency must be put first, and which is why CHP must be prioritized in our view.
Okay, thanks, Hans. Let me go back to you, Paul Voss, about you mentioned CAPEX, our opposition to OPEX. Financing infrastructure when it comes to district heating is always the big challenge, because there's a big upfront cost which is needed to put the infrastructure in place. So how do you typically cover those costs currently in your industry? And how can you possibly further encourage those investments to take place? Can policymakers, for example, help in any way? Or does the market work by itself? Paul.
Of course, 15 months into this and I'm still muting myself. Yeah, I don't think that a lack of money is the biggest problem in the world right now. I mean, there's money slooshing around everywhere. I think people are rather struggling to find places to put it. I think what is a bit special about district heating is that the risk profile is different from what you would find with a typical renewable electricity project, because there is this, particularly in markets where you don't have zoning, which sort of declares that such and such area is going to be district heating. You can talk about building a district heating network, but it can be hard to be absolutely sure that the customers are going to be there once it gets built, and that can complicate things. So I think the biggest problem that we have is political visibility and certainty that gives investors the confidence that they need to go ahead with projects like this. I think the discussion around heat in Europe right now is really lively and rich, but I think it's still very unclear what's going to happen. So that we'll need to resolve this question basically of whether we're going to go on heating our buildings with individual gas or not. If we're not going to, then it begins to open up enormous opportunities for heat networks and heat pumps. And I think there, what Robert said earlier in his initial remarks about the importance of more serious work on these comprehensive assessments at national level on the potential for CHP and heat networks, and more support for local authorities in their own planning work would be hugely important in unlocking capital, because once you have the certainty that the customer base is going to be there, then finding the money to support the construction of infrastructure, I don't think that's a difficult problem. We need to resolve our political problems, get a clear vision about how we want to heat our building stock in the future, and I think from that point, the investment case takes care of itself. The big issue we have right now is a lot of fuzziness around what's the future of heat in Europe, and the sooner we get that resolved, the better, and the bigger role we give to local authorities in determining their own futures, the better that will go. Because heat in the end, even though I like to discuss it as a European issue, there's a heavily and inherently local aspect to it. So cities will need to be given a leading role in this.
Okay, thanks. Let me turn to you, Piotr Szembor. Paul Voss said lack of money is not the biggest problem. Is that something you would agree with? I mean, you did say, after all, that the financing was a big challenge from your end.
Thank you. Thank you, Frederick. I think that there is a lot of funds for renewables heat sources, but some often conditions are not properly structured. There are too low intensity of support. Usually there is a loan, so we always prefer a donation. And for biggest utilities as we are, the share of support is less intensive than for smaller renewable producer. And we see in the pipeline as well a lot of funding like modernization fund, innovation fund. We try to ask for even due to deep decarbonization pathway. We try to ask for even higher modernization fund. But we still waiting for right now for final decision of state aid regulations, and what will be requirements for our project when we send application, because right now money are in are prepared, but we see that it's hard to receive it. For example, there is support for biomass plant, but we see some risk connected for sustainable biomass requirements. So it's huge risk. What will be price of biomass when there will be less biomass on the market? On biomass will be much higher. Then this is the risk for capex and long-term supply of such biomass. When of course there is finance for it depends on countries. In Poland we have support for CHP plants, but some requirements are not see how fast CO2 emissions, even for gas CHP, they grow very fast, and in the same time the costs of technology grow very fast. So it's a risk that if we receive some support and start investment, and of course there is a risk for gas as well, for gas prices. So operational risk from the operational costs in this type on investment is as well. Renewable energy sources. So we of course can invest in other renewable energy sources like solar heating or heat pumps, but usually it's not good solution for really large big heating system, like for example Krakow, Gdańsk, Warsaw, because you can build a whole district heating based on such sources. So rather we always try to build one main heat sources based on CHP, high efficient cogeneration, and then we try to find funding for local renewable solutions. And of course we can find it, and we always use it, but as I said, it's not for whole system, rather local solutions for smaller part of district heating areas.
Okay, thank you. Piotr Szembor, a question coming from the audience here, asking about the switch to hydrogen, because you did mention that there was a two-step approach in a way, where you're trying to switch your district heating systems from coal to gas, and then after that from gas to hydrogen. And the question is, how do you ensure that this hydrogen is not produced from fossil fuels, because the supply of green hydrogen is going to be limited?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have hope that hydrogen in gas networks will be green hydrogen or hydrogen which not will based on fossil fuels. This is we have hope that it happens because only green hydrogen give us a solution and give us opportunity to fulfill renewable heating requirements. We know that in the climate target plan there will be rather higher renewable targets, 40% by 2030, and of course we will need have more renewable heat as well. So we have hope that this hydrogen which will be in the district in the gas pipes will be renewables, and of course we have hope that there will be regulations which gives clarity and opportunity to mainly use green hydrogen in our networks. And of course, it's complicated system how to introduce guarantees of origin or PPAs for such fuels to guarantee that we will burn green hydrogen. So I think it's a huge challenge. We strongly support development of hydrogen economy and increase green hydrogen in gas network, and so I think it's a rather regulatory challenge how to fulfill this application.
Thank you, Piotr Szembor. It's a regulatory challenge, so let me turn now to the regulator, and that would be Robert Nye from the European Commission. So decarbonising district heating, we see it's going to be quite a bit of a challenge, but also opportunities, of course, because district heating is an efficient way of distributing heat. So broadly speaking, what are the kind of investment mechanisms that you have available currently at the European level, and the regulatory incentives that you have in place, and what further steps is the European Commission looking at as part of the coming Fit for 55 package to try and accelerate this transition away from coal?
Thank you. Well, that's a very wide-ranging question. I think that, first of all, on the regulatory side, as I mentioned, I think in the context of the EED revision in particular, so energy efficiency, we're looking at the provisions that are currently in place for heating and cooling, district heating, to see how they can be beefed up in view of the feedback that we've received also from stakeholders. And I mean, this is also a challenge for us at the European level. We've heard from several of the speakers that this is a local issue very often, that it's at city level or regional level, and we are trying to see how, from a European perspective, we can create the proper framework and support measures and instruments to support further work at those levels. That probably means, and I'm speaking again for energy efficiency, not a very sort of binding approach at this point in time, at least from the European perspective. Also in the Renewables Directive, we are looking at heating and cooling, of course, and also there we will see a strengthening of the requirements vis-a-vis the introduction of renewables, for example, in district heating. When we look at investments there, well, it's good to hear that money is not a problem, which is good. But of course, from a European perspective, we are providing funding, and I think that the biggest sort of source of funds that is coming available is through the Recovery and Resilience Facility that has been put in place. We are currently looking at the plans that member states have submitted to us and checking them and seeing if they comply with the requirements for those plans. And I think that member states can definitely use the money available, which is of course more in some member states than in others, to also support district heating. There are further funding. There's InvestEU. There is, of course, still a lot of funding coming through the operational programs and the way member states use that money also. So I think, indeed, I would agree that if there is willingness at member state level and at regional level to apply, to use the available funds also in the area of district heating and cogeneration, then that is perfectly possible. Bearing in mind that we really have to move towards fossil fuel free, ideally, heating, and that is a challenge, as we've heard. But we believe that also, given the long-term investment horizons of some of these investments, one needs to start now in moving in that direction, because otherwise we end up with a lot of sunk investments in areas where we don't want them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let me turn to Kaisa Riitta Koskinen. We just heard from the European Commission that there were funds, indeed, that are now available through the recovery plan. Of course, each country sets up its own demands based on what are the local needs. So is that something that you've considered personally in Helsinki, to tap into those funds to try and strengthen and extend the district heating network, and also finance that transition away from polluting fuels?
Yes, of course, cities are always interested when there is money available, and we are, having a discussion with the government to use that money to because, as I said, that the solution is probably going to be on the heat pumps, but they are a new technology still, and of course, it's a little bit more expensive at the moment, and we hope that we can use that money to cover or to subsidize a little bit that the extra cost of the new technology. So, but yeah, we are interested, and we hope that we get some money from the government for that purpose.
There's another source of funding, potentially this time coming from private sources, which will eventually become available thanks to the green finance taxonomy, trying to flag which investments are green. And I think district heating systems are actually recognized under the taxonomy as being green investments. Do you see this as helping in finding the investment sources that are needed to upgrade your networks and switch away from polluting fuels? And I'm putting that question to you, Kaisa, again.
Yeah, actually, our system, the network itself is very, modern already, so it is in very good shape. So we probably don't need so much money on the network, but we need money, to change, to transit the how we are producing the heat. And I think that on that help on that side, we need the private investments and the private operators to come and help us, for example, to provide heat to the network, and that's what we are really interested. But it's not only the big investments. It's also at the moment in Helsinki, many of housing associations, they are very interested about the geothermal, and they are investing money to change to heat pumps. And so it's not only the big investors, it's also the private persons who are interested on this opportunity.
Yes, and so do you think the taxonomy will actually help those people find the investment necessary?
My understanding is that it's the investments, they make already economical sense. So at least for the buildings, the housing associations here in Helsinki, it's not difficult to get money from the bank. So actually, they don't need a taxonomy at the moment. So because it's the investment which makes economical sense. It pays back. It pays back very quickly. It is very good investments, already without any subsidized or any taxonomy thing. So it is, wise investment, and banks are very happy to support and give a loan. So, but of course, it depends. Here in Helsinki, the price of the houses, it's very high, and so the houses, they have a value, and the energy efficiency, all kind of energy efficiency, or the geothermal heat pump investments are very profitable. So it of course helps, and that's the difference. Even in different part of Finland, it's the different story. But here in Helsinki, it's really not a problem.
Okay, thanks. Paul Voss, let me put the same question to you. How do you expect the green finance taxonomy to influence the discussion about funding for the transition in district heating systems? Do you expect some big impact from that, or do you see this more as rather limited because it already makes sense currently? And Paul Voss, you need to unmute yourself.
God, that's annoying. Sorry. No, I think it's important. District heating, not all district heating is particularly desirable. District heating, I used to say, even bad pizza is still kind of good, but it's not true of district heating. And I think it's important to be able to distinguish between district heating that needs to either be kind of reinvented or just scrapped, and district heating which is highly desirable because of the various attributes we've been discussing. And I think it makes sense to have a mechanism in also for finance to distinguish between these two things, and to say, well, this is the type of district heating that we'd like to support, and this not. Now, I mean, it's a messy business, this taxonomy. One of my colleagues follows it a lot more closely than I do, but I see that it's challenging, and so that I really support the idea in principle. In practice, I see that it's difficult to figure out quite where to draw these lines. And if I've understood properly, the discussion about gas and how gas fits in has been sort of kicked into the long grass for now, and that's quite normal. It's because it's a struggle for people to work out quite where to position it. I mean, gas is obviously going to have to play an important role in district heating and the wider energy sector, at least through 2030. But it's also true that we're going to have to move either beyond fossil gas anyway, in the period between 2030 and 2050. And so I think it's difficult to see exactly what to do with gas, and similarly with biomass for the reasons we've discussed. But for district heating itself, I mean, for the networks, for things like improving network performance and investing in thermal storage, I think it's really useful that these are explicitly characterized as green-friendly investments, and I do think that it will encourage and channel investment into the right sort of district heating in the coming years. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Piotr Szembor, maybe let me put that question to you now. Are you happy with the proposal that's currently on the table with the taxonomy? Do you think it will help drive those investments into less polluting district heating systems?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that this regulation will support stronger deployment of renewable energy sources everywhere, and in district heating networks as well. I think as well that it's not because banks will give cheaper money to investor, but because they will be hard to receive money for dirty heat sources or not sustainable technology, or such money, lending such money will be more expensive. So So it will support in this way. And of course, no one want to invest in projects which have high financial costs, and taxonomy will introduce such a model. Of course, it's important. It's important regulations to give financial institutions and investors clear information what investments are better and what are for what investments will be harder to receive financial support. So definitely it will support renewables deployment in district heating networks.
Okay, thanks. Same question to you, Hans Korteweg. Are you happy with the taxonomy proposal that's currently on the table? Do you think it will accelerate the transition?
I think it's a mixed bag of results. Unfortunately, as already referenced by a number of the speakers, it's a highly politicized process. Unfortunately, I think the intent and the instrument can be quite effective in terms of steering the right investment to help decarbonize district heating and cogeneration. Unfortunately, as mentioned, gas and nuclear energy has been sort of set aside or kicked down the road for another day. I would have liked to see everything included in one delegated act. We're very much in favor of a system-based approach, looking at everything together instead of looking at, unfortunately, in silos as perhaps we had done with the clean energy package, and now with the European Green Deal and the Fit for 55, we're trying to look at everything holistically. But that in the case of the taxonomy, we seem to be going in the opposite direction. The draft delegated act that will be finally adopted at the end of May already includes a provision recognizing the role of renewable-based CHP, so that's a step in the right direction. But unfortunately, the role of gas has been postponed. I think we all can agree that gas or natural gas will have a short to medium term role as we move to decarbonize between now and 2030 and ultimately net carbon neutral by 2050. So it's an important instrument. It's highly politicized. I would have liked to see everything in one regulation. It is a step in the right direction, but I think more can be done.
And talking about steps in the right direction, there's the big Fit for 55 package coming up in July. So Hans Korteweg, what would be your own expectations for that, again, in order to accelerate transition in this sector?
Well, I think we first have to recognize that CHP is an efficiency technology, which enables the significant reduction of energy consumption for all thermal energy sources available. In the case of this discussion, the speed of coal phase out is impacted by many factors that are very much political, so rather than the technical or economic. So regulation is important. What we need, of course, is stability and long-term thinking, and maybe 2030 is just around the corner and maybe not enough forward-looking. But in terms of the Fit for 55, I think some important aspects that need to be considered, especially when it comes to energy efficiency, and that relates to CHP specifically, but also has an impact on district heating, is the importance of primary energy savings. We tend to look at final energy savings in terms of buildings, and that relates to, say, micro CHP and district heating. We leave out a large chunk of the whole value chain. So we're not looking at everything at once, and supply side efficiency is also important, and also in terms of reducing losses from transmission. So we should be looking at everything holistically, but from the perspective of primary energy savings. Final energy savings is important, don't get me wrong. It's important to insulate buildings. It's important to have triple glazed windows and LED lights. No one disagrees with that. But in terms of increasing the system efficiency, things like primary energy savings needs to be taken more seriously. The Energy Efficiency Directive gives member states, for example, the option to choose whether they want to measure their energy savings from a final energy perspective or a primary energy perspective. I know it's rather technical, but I think it's important to stress. I think in terms of, well, the role of gas and the role of how renewables can play in the context of district heating and cooling, I think gas is just like electricity. It can be renewable. Natural gas can be a transitional fuel, and we need the right indicators in the Fit for 55 to enable investments in that direction.
Okay, thanks. Let me turn to Piotr Szembor, maybe to get your views about expectations around the Fit for 55 package, which is coming up in a few weeks now.
Yes, we're waiting for this package because we're waiting for clarification in many our investments. There is still a lot of doubts how final requirements will look like, how what final requirements will be, even for renewable energy sources which are now possible, like biomass, like waste incineration plants which use as well a part of biomass. What will be requirements for hydrogen investments? How will be covered operational and investment costs? What will be requirements for emission for CO2 emission, EU ETS emission directive, and and what will be requirements for high efficient district heating systems. So there is a lot of doubts about final regulations, and it will be influence on our investment portfolio and how we structurize such investment. So we have hoped, we're waiting for this regulation, and we want to see final regulation in this field.
Okay, thanks. Let me turn to Kaisa Rita Koskinen. I'm not sure you're following these Brussels matters in any kind of detail, but if you had kind of a wish list for policymakers here in Brussels who are working still on this upcoming package of legislation, what would you single out as being the 2-3 things they should be doing in order to help decarbonize district heating and cogeneration?
Yeah, actually, I only have one, so I'm an easy person on that perspective. So I really hope to see a clear target for zero carbon, because at the moment I think that we are using a lot of time to discuss if the natural gas is a good investment or bad. But when I read for example, the IEA report published beginning of this week, it is very clear that we have to get rid of all fossil fuels very quickly. So if we want to to stay under a 2 degrees path, we cannot burn a lot of forests, because we have to increase carbon sinks instead of reducing them. And that's why I think that it would make everything so much easier if there is a clear message that okay, the carbon neutrality is not enough, 55% is not enough, but in future we have to be a zero carbon, and at some point we have to be negative carbon. And I think that it would be save a lot of time from from a little bit that kind of unnecessary discussion about what is really the policy and what is the direction where we should go. And I really hope that if not in this package but in future the EU is able to make that kind of very clear statement that okay, by 2050 or by 2060 we have to be a zero carbon, not only carbon neutral. So but maybe can do this,
single-handedly. But let me point out, I mean, there was an agreement only recently, actually, to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. So there is that long-term perspective now. Do you think that's not enough?
No, I think the carbon neutrality, it's...
You need to unmute yourself.
I'm not actually... Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Carbon neutrality is a little bit different thing comparing to the zero carbon, because on carbon neutrality you still have an option to compensate on your emissions. But what I mean a zero carbon is that you really you cannot compensate anymore, and that's a quite big difference comparing to the carbon neutrality.
Okay. Yes, indeed, and there was no agreement on that. It's true. I think we're getting close now to the end of this online event. So before we close, I'll do a last round among all our speakers to basically state if you had one or two key messages that you would like our viewers to take home with them. What it would be, and maybe I can stay with you, Kaisa-Riitta, for that. Maybe you can start.
Yes. Today we have heard a lot of discussion about the transitional fuel and a natural gas as transitional method. But I think that when you are looking for the research on the climate change, we don't have that kind of luxury for a transition period anymore. So it was like 30 years ago, but now we have to get rid of fossil fuels fully, quite quickly. And so especially in the energy industry, where the quartile is 25 years, it is very important to make the right decisions now. Because, if we, at this point of the climate change, if we start to invest on the fossil fuels, even if they are not as bad as coal, it is for sure, it is going to be a bad investment. And so I think that we should, start to look at kind of future-proof solutions. And it is difficult. Everything is difficult at the beginning, but, at this point we have to do it. And this is maybe, my statement for this discussion. So it is possible. It is the district heat system. It has benefits, a systemic level, and we should utilize them. But if we utilize district heat system to prolong the burning of natural gas, it's not the right way to do it.
Okay. That was clear. Paul Voss, the key message that you'd like our viewers to take home with them, what would it be?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we have to hurry up. When I started working on these kinds of things, 2050 sounded like science fiction. And now it's sort of a long-term infrastructure planning horizon. So it's the decisions that we make in the next 10, 15 years that will determine where we are in 2050. It's not science fiction anymore. And that's why this upcoming package is so important. I think that by 2030, we need to have already set ourselves on a path to completely reinvent the way we heat and cool our buildings, and that means we're going to have to do it without burning stuff in time. That has to happen, and I'm looking forward to the negotiations on this new package. I hope that by 2022 or 2023, we see a framework in place that we believe is credible and ambitious enough to get us there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Piotr Szembor, your key message for today.
Thank you. Because I represent here district heating operators, I think that that we should remember that cogeneration give us a lot of opportunities in this pathway to carbon neutral Europe, and give us opportunities to storage energy in very efficient way, give us opportunity to faster deployment of renewable variable renewable energy sources, give us opportunity to very fast cut CO2 and other emissions in economy and in our cities, and give us opportunity to efficient use fuels when you compare to electricity produce only and heat produce only. So cogeneration should be definitely on our in our view when we think about fast decarbonization of our economy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Robert Niall, you have the privilege of closing. So what would be your main message that you'd like your viewers to take home?
I think Hans might be also still looking to say something, but I'm happy to go first.
Oh,
anyway.
sorry, I forgot you, Hans. Please go ahead. Your key message.
I'll be CHP is a very efficient way to convert 1 unit of energy into heat and electricity. In the future, we're going to still need heat, and we're going to still need a lot of electricity. Today, CHP renewable is around 30%, as I mentioned before, and that has tripled over the past 10 years. We also have to recognize that today, CHP only represents around 16% of heating and cooling in Europe, and an additional 15% of heat is renewable. So that means there's still about 70% of heating and cooling in Europe that is neither renewable or efficient, consisting mainly of inefficient gas and oil boilers. So as part of our decarbonization process, we need to make sure that we utilize energy in the most efficient way possible as we move towards a net carbon neutral and perhaps in the future, as mentioned, a negative carbon system. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And now to you, Robert Noe.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it is difficult. There are many messages, but I would say that it's clear that both energy efficiency and an increased share of renewables have to go hand in hand going forward towards carbon neutrality and for sure towards net carbon or zero carbon. I think the Fit for 55 package and what will come even beyond that, because we will have further measures, for example, on the EPBD, but also on gas decarbonisation later in the year, will provide an important impetus to drive that. But the Commission proposals are really just the start, and the negotiations with Parliament and Council will start. And if there is a message, it is also to the people around the table and the audience, is to actively engage in that debate, both in Brussels, but even more importantly at national level, because it is MEPs that go back to their constituencies. It is member states that have national constituencies. And so it is very important, I think, to bring your voices also to the table in those discussions, so that also stakeholders that have to implement much of this, which, as we said, is at local and regional level, have a voice in this debate that will take place maybe largely here in Brussels, but it should actually also take place at local and regional level and in the member states. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that wraps up today's event. A big thanks to PGE for supporting it. A big thanks to our speakers, of course, for joining us today, and to our viewers for watching this debate. If you've missed the beginning, you can watch the entirety of the debate again online. The video will be posted soon on YouTube. If you'd like to know more about upcoming events at Euractiv, you can check the website events.euractiv.com. We'll have actually many more coming up in the coming months. I hope to see you again soon, of course, and in the meantime, take care, stay safe, and bye-bye.